So we are here, we said maximum an hour and a half. And yeah, we're happy to answer questions. I'll just do a brief introduction. I think most of you, a lot of you, I actually know, whether I've worked personally with you or I know you through the homeschooling or unschooling community, through our Patreon community, or somehow we've connected. And not everybody I do those. So I'm Robin Robertson, and I am an unschooling parent. My kids are now teenagers. My youngest is 13, and actually it's a special day. My oldest turned 16. My son turned 16 today. So this is kind of like, but he's not here. So there's no celebrations with him, but it is kind of special because he still turned 16 today. And I'm the host and creator of Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids podcast. And that's kind of how I got connected, heard of Judy, and then later Golda. But really Judy, I knew, I had heard of Judy from the community. And when I was researching and finding out information that I wanted to know, I found Judy. And that's how I think I reached out to her and asked if I could. I don't even remember, Judy. I think I asked you to come on the show. I'm not sure if we chatted otherwise. I emailed you, but Judy's been a wealth of information for me and for our community. And Golda, we've actually worked together. And Golda's my homeschool facilitator where I live. And so I definitely have personal connections to both Judy and Golda. So welcome, everyone. I'll let Judy and Golda introduce themselves. I'm just going to mute my mic here.
Want to go first, Judy?
You go ahead.
I'm Golda David. I live up in northern Alberta, like Robin does. I am writing a book right now called Demystifying Education, and I have a website by the same name, Demystifying Education. I also work in education. I was a high school teacher for 14 years in the classroom. And I was a school principal for 2 of those years. And I'm an unschooling mother to one 13-year-old boy. I took him out in the middle of grade 3 when I was the principal of the school and started homeschooling him, and have naturally kind of gone into the unschooling modality because I feel like it suits his personality better, and because I've seen amazing things in my job now, which is I still work in education, but I'm actually a home education facilitator. So I help people get set up and meet the requirements of the government in Alberta for home education. So that's what I do. And then I guess it was kind of a rocky road to get here. I started off doing what everybody does at the beginning, probably had a bunch of workbooks. He worked through them. It was painful and hard, and I didn't feel like he was really learning anything. So that's my story. And it is a beautiful day here too, Robin, by the way. Cold though.
Fall is in the air. It's kind of cold down here too. But hi, I'm Judy. I'm from Southern Alberta, and I am done educating my children. So my work is in child development. So I've worked in that for 23 years, wrote a few books on non-punitive parenting. And then I had, along with that, I had 5 children, and 4 of my kids went into STEM careers or pathways after unschooling. So it's really interesting to watch their progress, because over the years, people have said, oh, your kids are brilliant. This doesn't work for the average person. And my counter active to that is, yes, it does, actually, because, with 5 kids, you have all different abilities, temperaments, personalities. And I've seen unschooling, and I have seen them go into more of a STEM pathways. I also am author of the book, Unschooling to University, which is becoming a bestseller. And I have a blog of the same name. And I'm just going to put it out there today. I went to a barbecue over the summer, and somebody asked me, well, I was trying to explain unschooling, and they said, well, how did they learn calculus? And we're right there. We were right there. So I wrote a blog post on my answer this morning, finally got it out there. So I hope to answer any of your questions, share experiences. Thanks for having me, Robin and Golda.
Thank you. I'm like in the background. I'm going to try and get your links, Judy, to your book, and I'll put it in the chat, and Golda's website, Demystifying Education, and my podcast, and you're in all that sort of stuff. I'll try and add those in the chat too. So I think maybe, we just asked if you want to ask questions, unmute, or put them in the chat. I thought really we could briefly talk about, because our focus today is actually on unschooling in STEM and questions around that. We were going to say unschooling in science, but I realized as I was creating kind of the promo, it was, thank you very much, Carrie. I appreciate that. Thank you, Golda. It was like the science of, I was trying to get the wording right. So we put unschooling and STEM. And because we also find that often we get kind of similar questions as well when it comes to science and math and different things like that. So, first I thought maybe we could briefly talk about, for us, how we interpret or define unschooling. It might even be a little bit different for each of us. For me, I usually use a term or a definition that Golda or that Judy often uses. And it's when the learner chooses the how, what, where, and when, and really defines their own why in learning. And that would be a simple definition for me of unschooling, but it's also for me more than just about the learning. It's really about the environment. And when I talk about the environment, the main thing is the relationship. So for me, unschooling as well is really about building the trust and connection with your kids so that they can, so that they do have the room and space and they have the choice, they have the validation to choose the how, what, where, and when of their own learning without, my interference really, or others' interference, that they can self-direct. If we don't have that trust and connection, it really is hard to step back and let go. And so that's a big part of the unschooling journey for us as well, is that practice, I guess that parenting practice as well, right? Partnership, support, and relationship is a big part of it. So that would be how I explain it. And the interesting thing I do want to say is my two kids seem to be following a STEM path themselves. I know that a comment I hear often is, oh, well, unschooling, most of the unschoolers they're artists. They go into the arts, and that's where unschoolers all go. But the interesting thing is I find like Judy, her kids, are different areas, but yeah, a lot of STEM. Both of my kids in very different ways really are interested in science. My daughter is, her path is looking very different, but it's a science kind of field that she's looking into, that she's interested in. And my son is really like living earth sciences, biology, living really within that. So it is very interesting that that's how their paths have gone as well. So yeah, so that would be my explanation in case anyone is joined and they're not really sure really what is unschooling and what does it look like. Judy, what would you say?
Okay, try that again. Yeah, I would say the same thing. The learner decides what you said, where, when, what, how, but I'd also say if. So they choose if they want to learn math or what concepts of math they want to learn at that time, or maybe never. And that's a hard time for parents to get their head around is, well, what if they never want to learn how to add fractions? And but it is self-directed learning. You can force kids to learn, and yeah, they may go through the motions, but they'll get rid of it as soon as they no longer need it. And like you said, what does that do to your relationship if you're coercing children to learn certain topics? Teachers get them for only a year. You're building a lifetime relationship with them. So that's very important. The other thing I also get is unschooling doesn't mean not using teachers or courses or online classes, but the key is that the learner has to choose it. It can't be forced on them from someone else. So even when I visit self-directed schools who have to follow government curriculum, they're not really learner-centered or self-directed, because if there's one hint of motivation problems, which they all deal with, they have sessions on that at their conferences, then that is not self-directed learning and it's not unschooling. So that's kind of my definition in a nutshell. Golda, what's yours?
I have relatively the same definition, but what I've been thinking about recently is value, like what is valuable, or what I think is valuable, or what I think that other people think is valuable. And what my son thinks is valuable is very different things. Especially right now, he's very adamant that he doesn't want to do any formalized learning. And also, I think what a question proposed on the Facebook page recently was, what would you have done differently? And I said I'd never put him in school so he didn't develop this resistance to it. So I think forcing your values on someone else is also detrimental, and can be detrimental to relationships, but also to, and that's in all relationships actually. If you try to force your values on somebody else, they'll probably not react very well, or they'll walk away if they're not really close to you. So I've been thinking a lot about that recently, like what are the values attached to it, and unschooling is letting someone else have their values and not be able, and not try to change their mind or coerce them or manipulate them into doing something different. And that I was raised in a fairly manipulative environment, where if I didn't do what my parents wanted me to, perhaps they would use some kind of other means to make me, aside from threats, right? And so I really struggle hard to not do that. And so unschooling to me means also allowing him to have his own value system, even if I don't agree, even if it bugs me, even if it really rubs me the wrong way, but allowing that anyway, and that's hard. I think that's kind of my 2 cents into what is unschooling. And it does work. I've seen it work. Like I've seen other people, because I'm a facilitator, I've seen hundreds of people in their homes unschooling their children, and I know it works. I've seen it work. I've seen kids come out of that having a really enriching, fulfilling life. And so I hold to the belief in, but maybe not, I guess I've convinced myself on a cognitive level, but I still have emotional issues with it. So that's mine. That's my definition.
Okay. I think it's probably a great time to begin with any questions. And of course, if no one has any questions to start, I think everyone knows that I'm happy to talk. Judy and Golda are probably happy to talk. But really, we would like, again, this is a Q&A, and if you'd like to bring any questions to us as well. Okay, so Carrie.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. I'm using a different microphone. Is it okay?
Yes. Yeah.
I was curious, Judy, just you had mentioned, I agree with you about the SDE schools where they do have that component, if they have to follow different regulations, that it can't be unschooling. I guess I was curious, how is there a good way for people to kind of unschool together or in community? I've been working real hard. I host 3 days a week. We have a unschooling co-op where any homeschooler can join. It doesn't matter what type of homeschooling you're doing, but when we have the meetups, always free play as an option. And I really try to run it as unschooling. And it's going okay, but there's some bumps because people have such strong feelings about what, how free the kids should be and not. And I was just curious if you know of any, I guess, really good examples of where people can unschool together, or is it not possible? Thank you.
I can start if you want, unless one of you has, but I met with a forest school lady back in June, and we talked about what forest school is. And I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying have a forest school, but it's just the way that she framed it. And the forest school philosophy is that it is child-led, period. Like, so she told me, so I had lots of questions. I kind of wanted to start one up here in Northern Alberta, and I might still do that later on this year. And I was asking her questions, and she said, when I show up, Golda, I don't know what we're doing that day. I have safety things in place the kids have had to agree to. We have a little safety meeting at the beginning based on what they've chosen to do, but they choose it democratically and they choose it together, and I have no say. And if it's as she said, sometimes I have an idea of what I want to do, but they say no, and it's no. And so I guess if you really want to be child-led, it has to be child-led, and you can make it a democratic process if it's not a very large group where you can split off and do different things. You all have to do the same thing. So maybe so I think that's one example I can think of. I mean, there's lots of unschooling schools out there, so I know that it's been done before, but that was one example of a practical application of unschooling principles that I've seen in practice now. So I think that's one example.
Hi, Carrie. I'm going to comment on this too, because I've definitely struggled with this when my kids were going to homeschooling and unschooling playgroups. And so in my book, I talk about radical unschooling, which is it's not just the educational realm, it spills over into parenting. And then there is educational unschooling, where parenting, families still have bedtimes, regular meal times. They unschool the educational part, but maybe not so much the parenting part. And the beauty about unschooling is it's whatever you think it is. There are families where that works. There are families where it doesn't work and kids just run wild. So you kind of have to decide where you're at. But I would, I don't know if you've ever read the book Summerhill. That's a school that's been going 100 years in England. And like Golda was saying, they run weekly democratic meetings on guidelines, and because you do need some kind of structure, safety rules to make sure everybody gets their needs met. And I think a lot of the families that we hung around with our friends and kids, we all had about the same, we were on the same page in parenting. I remember going to one unschooling group, and someone's child went and just walked all over my son's project and just didn't say sorry, no apologies. And he was heartbroken. And the family just kind of shrugged it off like, oh, well, things happen. And to me, that's not, I don't know how to say it, but it's that to me is not unschooling. That's running wild. So yeah, I have a lot to say on the issue, but I'm a parent educator. I teach parents how to not be authoritarian parents, but there are parents, kids need parents to teach them how to get along in the world, be a good citizen. And that's just parenting. I don't think that is improper unschooling. So I'm going to leave it there.
And I think Judy brings up a good point. I think you can still unschool and also be respectful and support values of respect and care towards other people. You can be a radical unschooler and support that. I think of actually 2 interviews that I had. One, I'm actually going to just release this week with Lady Liberty It was a really interesting interview. She's a world schooling mom. Her son is now an adult, and she's a radical unschooler. And she let me know. She's like, I am a radical unschooler. And we had an interesting conversation because her thoughts were, there's also the parenting line of gentle parenting, peaceful parenting, which many unschoolers adopt and use. Her idea, her line was that, we just have to be cognizant. Her belief was in partnership, and that sometimes we can confuse gentle parenting as just a really nice way of getting our kids to do what we ultimately just want them to do. It's a really nice way of control. That was her, our conversation about just being cognizant of where you are. And sometimes do we really want to give up control? Do we really have that full trust, or, really asking ourselves on that line? But when it comes to schools or a center, an adult learning center, the other person I was thinking about was Dan from Sudbury Valley School. And unfortunately, he passed away last year. His interview was fantastic because he was one of the original founders of Sudbury Valley Democratic School, which is like the one that so many others they go to for education on democratic schooling. It was a great conversation. And he brought up the point, because I asked him, well, you must have so many unschoolers. Like, this democratic school is for unschoolers. And he was like, no. He's like, I just want to make it clear that democratic schools and unschooling are not coexistent. They're not, they're not a feeder for unschooling parents. And this is what he also said. And it was around that idea of coercion, or really just wanting to get our kids to do what we want them to do, but in a different angle. He said, because when they go to that school, the parents have to step away. And so many times unschooling parents are so involved with their kids' lives and learning that many unschooling parents at that democratic school at Sudbury Valley have a hard time separating from their kids, from stepping away. And their belief is autonomy, the democratic process, especially as well, right? Where everybody has a vote, from the 4-year-olds to the 18-year-olds to the staff members. Everybody has a vote in every process of that center, of that school, the administration. There's the justice committee, all of that. But he said part of that is parents have to step away, and sometimes they've had a hard time doing that because letting go, right? So I guess part of it might also be of how you want to frame your community. Do you want an agile learning center where you want parents to be involved, but also to set your guidelines of, if this is a day where the kids, we're outside, however you want it to be, but I guess really it goes back to what community you want to create, and then having that conversation with the parents. So when they come in, when their kids come in, this is the expectations. Are they fully involved? Are they stepping away? Are they just letting the kids self-determine? Are you creating a framework? Because I know many agile learning communities, democratic, there's different kind of formats and frameworks, but it's just something to keep in mind of what you're supporting in that way. But those are different kind of ideas that I know I've received feedback on. And then there's other ones that I know that have a loose framework, but there's still expectations within the week or within the day. But I do know of ones where parents, that has been the big thing, is working with parents for parents to understand what it means to be self-directed or self-determined. And sometimes that means helping them to step away a bit more. But did that answer? Did Judy and Golda and I?
Yes, it reiterated a lot of things that I've been dealing with. And in fact, Judy, that comment you said, that hit home, the kid traipsing over, destroying your kids' creations. And that's kind of where I'm like, okay, now how do I handle this in a way that feels right? And it's the idea of, because you can be radical unschooling and then follow the guidelines to be in a community. I mean, we all know that, whether it's wearing clothes to the grocery store or whatnot. But I guess I was hoping somebody had just the perfect one for me. But I love the Sudbury School. I get that, and it's very interesting. But yeah, being unschooling, I do like my time with my kids, and I want more time. I'm not ready to send them off. Um, it's just, but it's still wanting that community and for your kids to grow up with other people and learning to work through things and getting to know each other. And so, but thank you very much.
I just want to add, because my whole life's work is teaching parents to not be punitive. And I think it's the difference between making your child go up to that child and forcing them to apologize, right? That would be authoritarian. Or pulling your child aside and having a quiet word and saying, you know what, here's what I'd suggest. I'd suggest maybe you might want to offer that child some show of you're sorry for wrecking his thing, right? It's a suggestion. So you're still being there, providing structure and lending your experience and your advice as parenting, but not forcing the kids to do it. And very often when kids aren't forced to do things, but they get direction on what to do, they'll do it, right? So anyways, I do give a lot of examples in my books on, I don't like to call it positive discipline, but it's, it's parenting, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with having parents in control. Just because when my kids are 2, I control a lot of their day. It's when I get pushback, that's when I become their equal and we negotiate that meets both our needs, right? And I try and teach that to parents is it's okay to be a parent, but it's how you deal with when your child doesn't agree that sets the impact for your relationships. So I'll leave it there.
Okay.
There was another question directed at me too. If I can answer that, that would be good.
Absolutely.
It was about
just how, go to that.
Yeah, it was about how my 13-year-old is she's not an only child, but my daughter is 26, so she's out of the house, so he's alone a lot of the day, and just with me because I'm also a single parent. And I guess that is challenging, not to have someone else for him to learn with or come up with things together or get into trouble with or whatever. That I came from a family of 5. That's why I say that. I was one of 5 children. So it is challenging. And I think the answer is that we make more of an effort to get out and do homeschooling events. That's been really hard in the last few years because of the pandemic and because a lot of people weren't comfortable getting together, or we weren't really allowed to get together at some points. But what we do is we try to have times when we go and visit people, and he can play with other kids, and they come up with their own things. I've noticed we do swimming things. We just have other homeschoolers where we hang out with other homeschoolers. I guess that's the answer, because those social skills that you learn as a sibling are not going to be something that he learns. You know, how they drive you. I don't know if you have siblings or not, but they drive you crazy and you have to deal with it because they're your sibling. So that's actually a valuable skill to have as a human being. And you don't have it if you're a kid doesn't have one at home. So I guess it's just challenging. We have to think around that and try to come up with things where he is being stimulated in that way. And also other kids that are homeschooled, I say that because the behavior of those children are often very different and their outlook is different, and they come up with different ideas. Like I found that homeschooled kids, especially unschooled kids, come up with interesting things to do. And quite often when he's gone after school, when the school kids are home in this little town of ours, they come up with very destructive things to do. And I'm not trying to classify all school kids the same, but that has been our experience so far, is that there's some destruction that happens because, and I tried to explain to him that that's because kids in school are often very frustrated all day. They have been talked down to or talked to and told what to do all day. And so they're reacting to that frustration and anger that they can't express all day. And that's maybe why the behavior is bad. So we try to hang out with more other unschooling kids because of that. So that's my answer. It's just more challenging. Anytime you have a different situation, you have more different challenges that you have to try and work around and find solutions to.
Okay. I hope that, Marianne, if you have any other questions to add to that, definitely just let us know or put it in the chat. So thank you. Are there any other ones, any other questions right now in the chat or that anyone would like to ask?
Hi, wondering how do you tell the kids when you take them out of school, you start homeschooling, there's no more formal schooling. So how do you start the kids off? What do you tell them and how do you speak to them? And yeah, I mean, we only know the parent side of things, but what about the kids? I mean, they'll be wondering how come I'm not going to school anymore? Or why am I taken out of school? Why am I'm not with the other kids? Why I'm homeschooling? So how do you manage this conversation with them? Thank you.
I do answer this question sometimes in my job, actually. I know it's hard. It depends on how old your kids are too, what kind of conversation you can have about them. I think the most important thing to do first is get very clear about why you're doing it for your own self so that you can communicate it honestly and clearly to them, because they want to hear the truth, right? Yes, it depends. The answer depends on your reasons. And one of the things I did in order to explain my reasons, not so much to my son, because he was so happy to be out of school, but my other people, was just to really read. I read a lot of books and I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I really got clear about why I was doing it for myself first. And then I was able to communicate it better to other people, including my son. And even now, every once in a while, he'll say, I want to go to school. Usually it's a threat because he's mad at me. But but he'll say that, and then I just say, okay, well, you can, but you remember all of the things that were bad about that, and then I kind of list the things that he found difficult about school and why he was saying. And he hears things sometimes in the community, like a kid from school will tell him, well, if you don't get a high school diploma, your life is going to be awfully hard and you're not going to be able to get a job. And he's like, what are you talking about? I've never heard that before. So I have to explain to him that that's not true, and that, and I now have examples of people who have been successful in life without having a high school diploma. And I basically say what I'm saying to you guys today is that it's possible to have a successful life without going to a formal school, and that he has the ability now to choose all of the things he's actually interested in and put his time, instead of going to school, put his time into doing things that might lead to him having a really fulfilling and interesting life and career. So that's kind of where I would say to that one.
Yeah, I would say as well, you know, my son was in grade 1 when we left school. So it's been a little while now, but when we decided to leave the school, my daughter was going there as well for a junior kindergarten program. We just had, they were part of our conversation of our plans of what we were going to do. And so the biggest thing is, you know, we were excited, and we shared it with them as possibilities and opportunities, and just asked what they would love to do. We wanted their contribution. Like, what would be some things that you would like to do during your day if you're not in school during that day? And so they became excited by the possibilities. For us, we did start out with more of a formal school as our homeschooling. We did not start out as unschoolers. So we did school in the mornings. But as we started, that's what we said, we're only going to do school in the mornings. And then by the time lunchtime comes around, like everything's put away and we're just playing. We're going to the beach. We're going to visit family. We're going, it's all of that will be put away in the afternoon. We're not bringing it back out again. We don't have the math textbook out. We don't have the phonics out or anything like that. So they also, they knew their time, and then they had such freedom in the afternoons that they were just so joyful. And then I relaxed as time went on, and it just became part of our daily living in that way. But the biggest thing was also those days where we did have more structure in the mornings. I also asked, like, I was thinking about doing this today. What do you think? And they would, yeah, this sounds great. We can do this and this, or no, we did this the other day. We wanted to try this instead. And I was always open to their feedback. But I think especially as they're young, that's a great place to begin with, that world of self-direction and choosing their how, what, where, and if, like Jesus, of their learning. That's a great place. Like if you could do anything you wanted this week or today, what would homeschool look like for you today? And really taking their suggestions and making it happen as well. Because then, I don't want to say the word buy-in, but essentially then, yeah, they're buying, like they have, when they feel the ownership of their learning, it starts to look very different as well. And it probably looks less scary too, when they feel that they have control over that too. Because the adjustment as well is you're going from a very controlled environment to possibly not as controlled or even less controlled. So for them, when they're used to this, there's probably some deschooling for them as well too, right? There's some changes in adjustment, but the conversation with them is important.
We didn't do preschool, so school was the first exposure my kids had to it. And my son was in grade 2. My younger son was in grade 1, and they hated going to school. So it was no problem pulling them out. And then at various ages, and then the next 3 kids just didn't even go, although my daughter did go to kindergarten. But my kids all went back to school. So every year we say, well, what do you want to do this year? You want to go to school? You want to keep on homeschooling? They didn't know we were unschooling, and neither did my partner. But I did. And at various ages, they all wanted to go. So they went back in grade 3, grade 9, grade 10, grade 12, and they stayed anywhere from 2 days to 2 months. And the fact that they had a choice to be there or not, I think really changed their perception of school and their place in it. So it was really good. Only one of them out of the 5 actually finished grade 12 in a school. His choice.
Logan, do you have a follow-up question to that, or was that? Yeah, okay. Thank you for asking. And it's great to see you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what time it is where you are right now, but it's great to see you.
It's 5 a.m. in the morning.
Wow. Thank you for joining us. He's on the other side of the world from us. So yeah, thank you. It's great that you're here. Okay. So we have another question as well. It's for you, Judy, in the chat. Did you read it yet, or? And I'm sorry, I'm playing with, I had funny settings when I first made this. So Judy, I've been trying, and I see what I did, but I'm trying to make Judy, I'm trying to give you the co-host and Golda, and then you can do what you need behind the scenes, but I see what happened. So I'm still trying to fiddle with this and make sure it can be adjusted.
That's okay. I just thought if you make us co-hosts, then we everybody, all the participants' videos won't show on the recording. Just, I don't know if they mind or not, but sometimes for privacy, people don't want to be on there. Sherry, your question. So A high school experience of self-directed learning. So if your child is interested in computer science, which is a fantastic career, obviously they like computers, right? Sorry, Sherry, I can't see you. But that's good, because with computers, you need a lot of time on screens to code, to learn coding, to make websites, to whatever you want to do in computer science. Now, if he wants, and a lot of careers now are so needed in that a lot of employers don't want to wait 4 years to get those university graduates out. I know places like Google are offering a 6-month program to teach the skills they need to hire for. If your child does want to go to college, probably the easiest way to do that is to get those 5 grade 12 subjects. Now, I'm going to assume you're in Alberta for that. So he could go, so anywhere, all the universities in Alberta just want 5 grade 12 subjects. They don't care about the diploma or your child getting comm or phys ed or things like that. Okay, you're in the US. All right. Well, pretty well, you'll probably need to present credentials in knowing that he does know science, does know a bit of math, can write an essay. So probably your best bet is the SATs, I would say, because I don't really know much about how requirements go, but I think a lot of universities are getting away from the SATs. But if he self-studies, writes the SATs, and then applies to colleges, he should be able to get in okay. Does that kind of work? I'm not too sure where in the US you live, but
Yeah, can I just add too, if you're in the US, and I just know of unschoolers who have done computer science as well and software programming. The ones that I know actually went to community college. So they started at like 16 and they started doing courses through their community college and they received an associate's degree. Dual enrollment, Tyra says, that's right. And depending, the great thing, what Canadians I often find don't realize, and what's fantastic for the United States is you actually have very affordable or free community colleges. I know Washington State recently declared that all community colleges would be free, access to them would be free. And if you want a further degree at a university, they will recognize your associate's degree as a full 2 years towards your bachelor's degree. So there are, so I know some who, did, like Judy was saying, they did their high school requirements and then applied. In the United States, it's also a little bit different, depending where you are in different provinces in Canada, but there's the interview process where you can also show your portfolios, your projects you've created over the years. And if there is something towards computer science and coding that they've done, you can include that with your projects and portfolios in the application process. But I know, for example, like Missy of Let Him Go Barefoot, her son is doing computer science and he's currently starting with his community college. I think he's in his 2nd year now of his community college program. I'm trying to think, Madison Canna, who was on my podcast quite a while ago, she's a software programmer. She did her last year of high school, but her sister is also a software programmer. And her sister did, I think Madison actually did Praxis. I think she did a year through Praxis, which I've also had Praxis on. I've had Cameron Soares be the CEO, where it's a self-directed alternative to college. They have focuses for STEM. And then I think her sister did community college and that's how she got into programming. So Petra just shared. I just know that about those specific instances when it comes to that. Petra said her husband's a computer programmer and interviews new applicants. University degree is not even a requirement anymore. Yeah.
I sometimes, if you do want to go to college or university, I sometimes remind people that there are often different avenues if you're not coming from a school. So I'll tell parents when they're interviewing schools to see which one they want to go to tell them that they're home educating instead, but also to remember that schools are businesses first and foremost. And the reason that they want you to have certain requirements met is because they want to make sure you're successful, because their rating goes down if they have people or kids that are not successful in their program, and or if it's too easy and they're, you know, they don't get a job afterwards because it's not seen very well. So they have to keep their reputation up, but they also want to keep their success up at the same time. So the reason there's barriers to go to those places is because of a business model that's very different than other business models. So just when you're applying to that, if you keep that philosophy in mind, sometimes presenting a portfolio of work that you've completed in a certain area will supersede anything else that you might do, or volunteer work for certain areas. So I think that there's ways around rules of certain universities and colleges because they are running a business model, and it's just different than most business models.
Yeah, there are so many, especially there's so many programs now as well too, where you can self-study, and I put Discover Praxis in the chat because they are an alternative to college where you do 6 months with them of mentorship and direct learning. And then you do 6 months in the field, and they actually have companies that they're connected with that you receive a paid internship. So the whole goal is, one, you don't have very high debt. Your paid internship after 6 months pays for your first 6 months there. And then you get direct practice in the field. And most of their Praxis graduates continue to work for either that company they did an internship with, or they're connected to another one because of it. So I know there's more, there are more places like that are being created as well. But I know software is a big one for them as well. And they have companies contacting them saying, hey, we want self-directed learners. We want self-starters. We've seen the ones that are coming out of your program. They have a lot of homeschoolers actually that attend their program, or that are students there too. All right. Oh, there's some great shares in the chat as well too. Okay. LinkedIn, Pulse, why school might face issues. Yes. Okay. I thought maybe as well, we could talk a little bit about, because we wanted to focus on STEM, that idea of that when they're going into a STEM career, that they have to start early with specific formulas and, textbooks and memorization and things like that. And if they don't have that specific school style of learning, then it's going to be really difficult for them. I love how there's actually people, quite a few I know in here have partners who themselves work within the tech and software industry. So that is awesome and that are sharing too. So, but I thought that was something we could also talk about, because as we talk about self-directed learning and unschooling, and so much of the learner chooses the if, how, what, where, when, and it's their driven why. And it is playing video games. And it is maybe playing in the dirt for hours and collecting bugs, or it is, I think of like going and practicing elk calls in the coulees for 5 hours in a day, or something that maybe, or just wanting to build Lego for a week on end, and your living room floor is covered in Lego nonstop, and you worry, oh, shouldn't they be doing their multiplication tables right now? Or shouldn't they be doing this? We could talk about how even from a young age that open play and projects are important to that field. So I'm going to introduce it, and Judy and Golda, I'll let you take it away there.
Go ahead, Judy, if you want to go first. You have more experience than me, actually.
I'm sorry, I've been too busy chatting. What did you say? What am I supposed to talk about?
It's all good. It's really, I just wanted to talk about how, we get in that mindset of that like especially if there's a future in STEM, that our kids need to be sitting down with a math textbook and worksheet and memorizing formulas or doing certain physics problems. And that if they don't do that from a young age, that they can't get into a STEM career. That if they're building Legos for a week nonstop, if they are, I think of my son who, one afternoon we went out and we're doing we brought our journals and I had this plant app and we were like taking plant snippings and trying to figure out what they were and recording them. But, he did that for about 10 minutes. And then he pulled out his elk bugle and he wanted to practice bugling elk for the next 3 hours. And it was, that was fine with me, but maybe some parents might have, not been comfortable with that. Really, in the end, it was important for what he's doing now. Like it was actually very important practice for what he's doing now. But can we talk a little bit about that, that worry I think parents have if we're not doing those schooly things, that we're not giving them any advantages or opportunities within the STEM fields if that's what they're interested in.
Oh, I could get on my soapbox about all the
I know. Yes.
the educational STEM toys and, in the toy stores and how all the STEM day camps you got to sign them up for and the after school activities. And I'm like, oh no, let them get out there and play in the mud or, hack a website or whatever they want to do. Right. I think, I've talked about this before. I'm not going to show my little brain picture, but when kids get into ages 13, 14, they get their prefrontal cortex, right? That abstract thinking skills. And if they want to learn something, they're going to learn it. And they're good with computers. They're going to find it. I have to chuckle every time someone posts on Facebook, oh, my son's interested in coding. No, let's use the daughter. My daughter's interested in coding. I have to find some coding classes for them. And I'm like, if they really want to learn coding, they're going to find it before you are. It's all motivation. So they're going to, and yeah, they don't need to know math formulas or things like that. They need that for math. Some post-secondaries use math as a sorting tool for really competitive programs. But again, if kids really want to do something, they're going to do it. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to have the math skills to teach them. You don't have to have the computer skills to teach them, or you don't have to have the internet search skills to find something for them. Just leave them on the internet and let them find things, right? Off my soapbox. Let them play.
You're so right. My son got interested in coding, so I bought him the program Unity because that's what he said he needed. And then he was talking with other people online, apparently, and looking at YouTube videos and then finding other sources of information through the YouTube videos. That the world has changed a lot in the last few years because there's so much out there. Like if you want to learn something, you can learn anything. You just have to have the tools. When I think of science, I think of he got interested in natural medicine, and that led to, so first he got interested in natural medicine. It all started because I had signed up a group of homeschoolers to go with our First Nations people in the area to go hunting for something called rat root that's supposed to help with colds and stuff like that. So we were hunting for rat root, and he had been on some medication. And when he dug it up and he was listening to the elders speak about what it was for, he said, so this is medicine. And that was it. Like for him, for the next 2 years, I bought him books and he went and searched for, I got dandelion roots and a whole bunch of plants all over my kitchen table, dirt everywhere, little pots bubbling on the stove I'm not allowed to touch because my energy will interfere with the strength of the medicine that he's making or whatever he was talking about. But he got really interested in that. And then actually later on, he was in a young entrepreneurs class and took that and used it to make a natural medicine for his Young Entrepreneurs Project. And so I think that lots of things, kids are really curious about lots of things, and they get these random things will pique their curiosity and they just take off with it. And there's nothing you can even do to stop it, because I did not enjoy the dandelion roots on my kitchen table, but I saw the interest in a deep learning that was happening. And I think he was only 9. Like he was just very young, not even able really to read yet very well. So that's the reason for the videos, was that he was searching. I think there's lots too that happens in our lives, in our everyday lives, that piques people's interest. And I say people because it happens to us too. Like we had a little hobby farm for a while, and he was learning lots of things about various animals and how to take care of them and what they ate and things like that. So I think the STEM field specifically is actually really interest led. For me, I have zero interest in coding. I don't even know why people would want to do that. But I know my brother, though, he is, he's a high level coder and network specialist, and he's even worked for places like NASA. So he's very interested in that. So I think that those careers and those ideas are really highly interest led, because you have to want to. Otherwise, I can't even imagine being forced to learn coding if I didn't want to do it. Wouldn't that be horrible? I'm sorry. I don't know how you feel about it, but that sounds like torture to me.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, because I've done a little bit of like playing around with coding with my kids when they were younger on like code.org or something like that. And it's interesting, but yeah, like Judy's into it for sure. Judy's like, I would have switched. She'd maybe switch careers in that one too. But okay, so I'm going to bring this because I'm surprised no one has asked this yet, but maybe everyone here doesn't care about this anymore. And we've been together enough on some of these Q&As or in Patreon or wherever, or Clubhouse, that we've talked about this or listened to Judy's episodes or any, but what about, and I see it's mentioned a little bit in the chat, Cindy mentioned this too. What about screens and video gaming though? Isn't that a problem? Like if they're playing a lot of video games, I'm just asking because no one's asked it yet, and maybe no one cares right now. And if that's not a big thing for you guys at all, fantastic. And just, you can let us know in the chat, but just in case, because usually it is a question. Yeah. What about Robin, Rainy Robin? Yeah. The other Robin. I mean, yeah. Okay. My son games all day long. Cindy had said her son was a big video gamer, that who was a computer science a programmer. I know Judy's kids are big gamers. I know Golda's son is a gamer. Okay, there's still a fear. All right. Okay. So with gaming.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's directed at you, Judy. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, like you said, I have all my gamers here. Funny, I have nobody into sports. Like my 4 boys don't even know what hockey team our city has. But their dad's a gamer and got them into it. So yes, and I hate to say it, but we had no limits. Even though I was teaching parents about limits and provincial guidelines, and yet I go home and mine would be on all day, all night. But in short, I'll just say, when kids get their prefrontal cortex, they start getting self-control, and they start realizing that other things in their life takes precedence, maybe a job, maybe school, post-secondary, those kinds of things. And they start self-regulating. And I know from the science, from working with Alberta Health Services for 13 years, that the science is that nobody is addicted who grows up in a nurturing family with low toxic stress. Yeah, and addictions are caused by brain impairment, and in a nurturing family that won't happen. So I like to know what parents' fears are about too much screen time. I also do promote the concept of getting enough sleep, good sleep hygiene, getting enough exercise, eating right, and having some relationship time too, because that's just healthiness. So I have pressed my kids on that. I haven't pulled them off their screens or taken away their computers, but I do promote good habits. So, and now I think they're still all gamers, which is great because they live in another country, another city. I love walking into my living room, which is the gaming room. And you know, 3 of my kids and my husband are on a game with my other kids who are far, far away. And it just warms my heart that they're all laughing and playing together and de-stressing from their jobs. So I'm for games, and get your girls on games, get your girls in STEM, get your girls in tech, not just for the guys.
So, okay, so there's a few questions, Judy. One was, how old were your kids when you allowed unlimited screens?
Well, maybe you should turn off the recording for this, but my husband introduced,
Like, do you want me to, or?
no. They were about 7 when they got their first Nintendo, and they played about 16 hours a day. They loved it, right? You give them something like that, they love it. They just want to do everything about it. And yeah, it got better as they got older. Like when they're 17, then they only played 12 hours a day because they had a job. But yeah.
Right. I was gonna say, this is a follow-up, but I'll ask the other questions first before this other follow-up question. Okay, so I actually did post in the chat. Judy had mentioned, she talks about, she didn't specifically mention ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, but she has talked about it before. And I posted her blog post on her website about adverse childhood experiences and talking about, when we're talking about trauma or experiences that can affect things like when we're talking about addictions, that is a very important conversation to have. And I definitely recommend going to there. But the follow-up as well is, I'm afraid they won't find interest if they only game. Is one of the,
Yeah.
there's a few other questions, but that's the
I
next.
love that because I worried about that too. But again, I talk about the buffet of learning. Like if you don't get into the habit of saying, oh, you can only video game if you read this book or if you do your chores, you're putting one on a pedestal and you're putting everything else not on the pedestal. So, but if you give equal time, equal value to everything, kids will find interest. And sometimes life makes that space for you. So, for example, in our house, every Monday night was library night. So yes, it was tough pulling him off the video games and saying, okay, it's time to go to the library in 20 minutes, wrap it up. And even now, my kids and we got into a habit of negotiating. Like if they're starting a game at 5 o'clock, our dinner's at 5:15, they're on with a team, they can't let them down. We talk about it, we negotiate, and I am sensitive to their time constraints. They're sensitive to mine too, and what my needs are in parenting and running a household. But yes, they absolutely, a lot of games just stimulated their interest. So when they went all out, Nintendo was big, Zelda was big, but they didn't just play the games. They'd play the games, and being like 8, 9, 10, 12-year-olds, they would make ocarinas when they played Ocarina of Time. They would make masks when they played Majora's Mask. They would mod games from Minecraft or from Grail or some of those video games. They would write stories when they played Kirby. I have 4 boxes full of them, not even able to write yet. They would draw the pictures and they would tell me the story and I would write the story. And it was just amazing, their thoughts and their storylines of Kirby and all the other characters. So I found video games actually stimulated their interest. They would make costumes, they would make dolls, they would make, because Nintendo didn't have them out yet, puppets, they would make figurines. They really got creative, and then they would use those to play and make stories around them and put on puppet shows. So no, they found a lot of interest, and they would play with the video game items with other kids. So they bring them to the park, they bring them to play dates and play too. So had no problem. And as they got older, they did really beautiful artwork. My one son, he was selling his artwork on art platforms, and he's very good from drawing video game characters.
Okay, I actually put that one point that you said, equal value to everything is important, and putting something on a pedestal, and you know, maybe we have a lot of value in something, but maybe our kids just don't see the relevance in that or the value in that, for sure. Okay, so the next question is my concern is that our son blames us that we didn't do or make him do other things. Although the next comment was, yes, we do the things we love. So I guess the concern maybe is that, is it, I'm not sure, maybe if you can explain a little, is it the opportunity that you feel that he might not have, or that does he want to do other things? But maybe we need a little bit more clarification on that. But that was my concern, is that our son blames us that we didn't do or make him do other things, I guess, other than gaming.
I've heard that. Oh, sorry, Golda, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I heard that too. I was listening to a TikTok of a former unschooler, and she was very critical of it. So I can see where that fear comes from. Go ahead, Judy.
And I've heard that from people too, saying, oh, I'm so glad my parents made me take piano because now I can play piano. And I mean, I was that parent. I signed my kids up for piano when I noticed that they would, you know, tinker a bit. I signed them up for other things when I noticed a brief interest. And we slogged along for a year as they lost their interest. And I was getting frustrated with the time and the money. And I'm a big proponent that if you empower your kids to own their education early, I don't think they will come back and say that to you, that you should have made me take piano. Because if you really believe in them owning their education, you have to believe in it, right? And once they're 15, 16, they get money, they get to learn how to drive. They can do these things themselves. They can go order their own piano lessons, or they can learn a new language. I've seen my kids start musical instruments again at age 16, 17, learn languages at age 20, 21. They can do it. Sure, it's a lot easier when they're younger, but it's absolutely not impossible or even hard to do it when they're wanting to and they're motivated. So I just tell my kids, well, sorry, bad mom.
Yeah, we're all doing the best that we can. And there's always going to be something like, you know, I think of, you know, that piano example. I started doing piano lessons when I was younger. And at one point, I think I did tell my mom, like, why didn't you let me keep doing piano lessons? But, and the flip in the perspective, she was just like, you know what, you needed a bigger piano, because I think we were using like a keyboard or an organ or something. I can't remember what my grandma had given us. And she was like, we needed a full piano. And we couldn't get a full piano at the time. There, you know, there was other things happening in our life that as a child, I didn't comprehend, that were factors, and, you know, getting to the lesson and things like that, that once she explained it, and as an adult, it was, oh, okay. It wasn't about me being limited. It was just, there was so many other things happening that my parents were juggling at the time. It was just really difficult for them. And I think maybe, yeah, if I still played on my own, which was wonderful. And there's still time to pick up instruments now and to learn. And I am still learning, you know, I'm learning something new as well. So I do want to say in some of the chats as well, and I think maybe this is a good question as well, as we've been talking about video games, and often it gets lumped into screen time as well. And sometimes there's a question about, actively playing video games and passively watching screen time. Is there a difference for you guys? I know my kids are not big gamers. They definitely game. My daughter actually is more of a gamer than my son. And over the years, my son has gamed less and my daughter has gamed more, but partly it's a social thing for her as well. Her and her friends will go online and game together. And that's usually the biggest part of it is their meetups that they can game together and play. And so then, my son is more of, he loves anime. And he would watch, he loves to watch anime. So that's screen time. Is there, what do you guys think? Is there a difference for you between playing video games and watching screen time?
I mean, you'd have to monitor it, I guess, to even know what they're using their screen time for when it comes to just passively watching. But I do know too, just from being a user myself, that it can kind of draw you in and suddenly there's hours gone out of your day. So I guess it's what we say. When I was a high school teacher, we used to say that we didn't want phones taken away in the classroom because we wanted to teach them how to manage their own selves. And I'm not talking about a 5-year-old. I'm talking a little bit older, I think, because somebody brought up that 5-year-olds, like a lot of the tablet computers and stuff, are geared towards kind of drawing them in and not being able to, and basically being advertised to. So that was a good point, actually, whoever said that. But one of the things that happens is you get drawn in and you take a lot of time, and maybe it's not. And I know for myself, sometimes I'm kind of upset with myself that I did that. But at the same time, as when they get older, that's kind of a learning experience too, right? Because you do need to learn how to manage it. You have, as a person in this society where we have phones in our pockets at all times, we have to learn how to manage ourselves. And for younger kids, I think it's kind of almost enchantment. Like you see them watching TV and you can't get their attention because they're completely engrossed in it, which isn't terrible. But you do maybe have to show them how to switch gears if they need to do something. They need to do something else. One of the problems sometimes for my son is he'll say, "Oh, I'm hungry" at 10 o'clock at night and it's bedtime or whatever, and it's because he's gotten drawn into something and hasn't been able to manage it. So I think it's just a matter of those being developing a culture where that could actually be something that teaches them how to manage themselves better as time goes on. That was kind of where I was thinking when that question came up, was that I myself as a teacher in the classroom back when I used to do that, my philosophy was that the only way you can learn to manage screen time or your phone or those kind of distractions is by actually having it and managing it over time. And that would take some effort and conversations, one conversation at a time, to continuously kind of talk to them. And that's what parents do, right? We help our kids come to conclusions and understandings about themselves over time so that they can manage their lives better later on. So that was kind of my 2 cents, and I will let one of you comment as well.
I think that's so important, is to learn to manage that time, because I remember when we first got social media, and I'd be on Facebook till 4 a.m. because I found something new to look at, and it was crazy. It was affecting my life. So I had to learn that, you know what, I turn it off at 6 p.m. and I don't go back on screens till the next morning. So and that works for me, probably doesn't work for my kids. But it is. But I do think, even if a child watches TikTok all day or for hours, it's still way more interactive than old TV used to be. Just sitting in front of TV, you didn't have any links to click, or, it wouldn't go on to something new. It's still more learning for the kids. And I think there's so much to watch on YouTube that is good learning. There's so much that isn't, but they will find what's good and worth their time as they get better at that too.
Okay, I also want to be cognizant of our time. So we have like just a little less than 15 minutes here, about 13 minutes here too. I just wanted to share a quick story of when my kids were younger. We used to do the, you get, for every hour of screen time, you would have to do half an hour of reading, half an hour of writing. And at first it was like, that was just it. And then of course they caught on like, oh, so if I do another half an hour of writing and another half an hour of reading, I get more screen time. And we were like, yeah. So, they started understanding that, but we, obviously that's still limiting. But one time I got up, and I like to get up early in the morning. It was probably about a little bit after 5. And I got up and I heard some noises, and I went into my kids' room, and this was when they're younger, and they actually shared a room at this point. And there was my son in bed, passed out, but the laptop was open and the show was still playing. And it was, so obviously he had probably just fallen asleep, and the screen hadn't gone into sleep mode yet. So, probably it hadn't been that, it's a little bit after 5. Most likely he'd been up all night watching screens. And I was at that point, and I got my husband up. I'm like, come see, it was that point, because we had started being really strict on screen times at that point. We realized, okay, so obviously this isn't working. Because if our child is sneaking to watch screens at nighttime until they pass out at 5 o'clock in the morning, we need to do some adjustment on this. So we started relooking at our idea of screen time, and also communicating with our kids about it. And then, I think both Judy and Golda talked about, even in this practice of self-direction, it's a practice. And if you don't get a chance to be self-directed or to make choices, we can also expect our kids to all of a sudden, here you go, and expect them to make a certain choice, or what we call the right choice. You need to practice it as well. And also, try to have a place where they feel safe and comfortable that, to make mistakes. I don't make the right choice all the time. So for me to expect my children to always make the right choice, especially when it comes to something like, like that, where it is so enticing and engaging, and, it is designed to have us stay on there. If I have a hard time myself as an adult, then I really need to think about my expectations I'm putting on my kids as well. I just wanted to say as well that there's some great conversations in the chat, and that other question that we just asked for a bit more information on, about the child being upset or blaming the parent. So there is a little bit more information on that, on doing things other than gaming. She said sometimes it's just so open-ended that I feel he falls back on gaming or TikTok out of boredom, and timid about trying new things. So I mean, part of it is part of here that maybe you want him to try new things, but there's a little bit of a dynamic where the concern is, do you push him? Do you not push him? Is he not pushing himself, but you want him to push him more? Do you guys want to speak to that a little bit as well, Judy? And if we're missing anything in this conversation, just let us know as well too.
Well, I was a nudger. So I would ask the kids, I'd say, hey, do you want to sign up for something? Because right now it's September, right? So programs are up. And if your child's interested in skating or something, I would say, well, do you want to go skating for the skating group once a week? And they would say yes. And then, 3 weeks later it starts, and then they're whining because they didn't want to really do it. So I'd always be sure I would get them to sign a contract that, yes, you agreed to this. I didn't just sign you up. But I like to encourage. I encourage my kids to come out on a walk. Nowadays, they're, 20s, and they're encouraging me to come out on a walk with them. So they've developed some good habits. And I think that's what encourage does. But it means if they really don't want to do something, I'm not going to force them to do it. It's still their choices, right? So I think building time and space for having other interests is really good, and even though we unschool, we did have a routine to our week. Monday night was library night. Tuesday night was parents go out to Toastmasters night and they get to game. Wednesday night would be something else, like meeting up with friends at a park. So we had routines. Thursday would be grocery night. So it wasn't, gaming tend to be the filler time in between going out and doing other things of interest that were built into our week. And everybody manages it differently. Yeah. What do you think, Golda?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking a whole bunch of things while you were talking. They all seem to dissipate. I often make that there was on a podcast, there was something about ice cream, and I can't remember which podcast it was anymore. I've mentioned this before in other webinar questions and answer sessions like this, but how the first scoop of ice cream is really, really good, and then the second scoop is still pretty good, and then the third scoop. And it was related back to the hours of screen time and how eventually there would be kind of a push and pull, like something, if you had other things for them to do, there would eventually be an interest in doing something else, because how many scoops of ice cream can you really eat until you're bored of it, right? Eventually you would get kind of bored. I was a little reluctant to tell that story because that was brought up in an argument with my son just recently. He goes, "I thought you told those people it was like ice cream." So I go back and forth sometimes on this issue because I do, like, again, I'm trying to struggle against my values conflicting with his values, and him being 13 now, he's kind of resistant to any parental authority. And I'm trying to find a balance, and it's not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy. Like, we were having an argument about that screen time thing, and he was resisting it by bringing up something he heard me say in a webinar, which I am not happy about, but that's what he does. So I go back and forth on this. It is hard to find a balance. I know that from personal experience, is that I would like for him to do chores first, for example, and that is kind of something that I force an issue about, because I feel like chores are not fun, and if he could opt out of them, he would, which is true based on. So there was times when I just let him completely radically unschool for a month, and then felt conflicted because I really didn't feel that his time was spent well, and that's the value in it. And so anyway, I just want to tell you, it's not easy for me either, or for us, probably all parents. Even if you're struggling with this idea, it's because that's normal. And I think some of us have come to, like, I listen to Judy, and then I like go off and I'm completely unschooling, and I believe but then it comes down to values, and sometimes it conflicts with what I think is important, or what I've been taught is important. So I kind of struggle. I go back and forth, and I just wanted to share that because I know that there's some people here that might be experiencing the same thing, and I want you to know you're not alone. It's hard to come to that, like, kind of an agreement with yourself so that you can really embrace their freedom. But I do think going through this struggle is valuable, because I do believe in the long run that will be better for my son, both as an adult, where he's been trusted and has had freedom to learn what's important to him and what he values, and to trust himself, because I think so many of us grew up without trusting ourselves, including me. And I think that maybe that is worth whatever struggle I go through right now to come to these conclusions.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember that we are all human beings learning as we go. And sometimes we might have a thing about screen time. And one of my things was, I remember our daughter, we had like a family meeting one night, and I think maybe it was about, I can't remember, but my daughter brought to us she said, "Okay, so then this is my ask. At 5 o'clock, Mom and Dad, you put your laptops and phones away until after we're gone to bed." And it was like, oh, right. Okay. So we're asking of them something that we're not asking, they are now asking that of us. Or, what are we modeling and living and practicing as well? And so, you know, it wasn't easy. We realized like, okay, time for our phones to go away in our bedroom. And I think even one time my husband was like caught sneaking back into the bedroom to check some messages on his phone. And, you know, but that's how it goes, right? And after a while, I mean, obviously that kind of went by the wayside. We don't go by that anymore as well. So I think it's also important to keep note of what we are doing as parents at the same time too, and to be aware of that too. But that's just one thing. I do that whole TV. I know in the conversation, the TV, no one watches TV anymore. It's true. But I think my parents used to complain that I watched too much TV and they were really worried about me. And ironically, I don't watch very much TV now. But there are times where I will binge on a show. Like my husband watched Game of Thrones, I think, for 4 days straight, nonstop one time. So again, it goes like he's talking about his son watching a lot of anime and then he, you know, there's no problem with 4 days of binge watching Game of Thrones. So again, it's, you know, understanding where we're at as well. And I know books was a very concern when books came out. I think I'll have to find it, but there's a quote from Socrates. I can't, or something with the argument about the dialogue. It used to be conversation and dialogue. And then when books and reading came about, it's taking away from our educational dialogue, and that books are bad and they're not good. And that we have to be wary of how much time we are spending reading these books because it's not good for our learning. So then we take that idea and place it to TV, then to screens and video games. So it's been a conversation we've been having for centuries, but we just changed that tool. That is our tool of our current day. So yeah, there's different viewpoints on this. Okay. There's many great there's a really quick question as well from Logan about STEAM arts. Instead of STEM, but STEAM with the A for the arts, and that any feedback on this? Even when the kids go for a uni interview for a tech course, they are asked about their interest in the arts. Okay, so.
Yes.
And then we will close up.
I know my 4 kids who went to university, even though 3 were in STEM pathways, they had to have a certain number of courses in arts and humanities too, which is giving a balance to both sides of the brain, which I found interesting because my husband went to university in England, and he has nieces and nephews who've been there, and they do a 3-year degree, but they don't have the same balance. If they do a humanities, they do no sciences. And if they do STEM, they do no arts or humanities. They just get right to the course. Where in North America, we have 4-year degrees that balance that out. So yeah, it's very important. And yeah, it's good for all areas of the brain. I just wanted to add something too. My son, who I didn't, who I thought was the video game addict, he is now a parent. I have a grandchild, and it's really interesting to listen to him put the rules to me about what she can and can't watch. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I let you do that. So just that one.
I love that. That's it's true, right? The circle, how it goes. That's right. The arts, Golda said, I think the arts are included because they want creative problem solvers and they equate arts with creativity and ingenuity. Yeah, for sure. I know my degree my school was a liberal arts school, my university. So it was the same as well. I had to take another year of other courses that had nothing to do with my degree, just to get the well-rounded. The nice thing about it, there was some things I probably wouldn't have taken that were that became of big interest to me, which was nice. The other thing about the arts, I have one child who is, my daughter who is interested, actually psychology is what she's interested in right now. And she, on her own, she's asked to find some courses and doing that on that. But she's also very into arts. My other child is not so much into, you would think, the arts, the traditional arts, But then I guess that's the other question is, what do we really classify as the arts? You know, some would classify some design as an computer design as an artistic activity. You know, languages, whether it's, you know, maybe it might not be painting or drawing, but it might be something physical. You know, that's, you know, I think that's there is a broader definition of the arts as well too, and what is included with it. I think probably Sydney would probably have some interesting feedback on that, on the arts and our brains as well, and things that we can do to incorporate that, or what falls under that. But, you know, I always find that interesting too. What do we specifically categorize as the arts as well? Okay, we are at 5:03, and I know we were going to try and keep it on our time. So we are going to close up. Thank you so much, everybody. Judy and Golda, what else did you want to add here?
Well, I really appreciate that we're doing this again. So thanks to both of you. And I appreciate the great dialogue this time. We don't always get questions right away, so it was really nice to have a conversation with everyone else too. So thanks for everyone for their participation and for coming today. Thank you.
Hello, my laptop ran out of power for a minute there. Yes, I enjoyed this. Thank you for coming. I just want to say, if you have any more topics for us we could do a Q&A on, we would love to. We want to know what you want to know about. I also, if you don't have my book, I am giving it away, but you have to pay the postage, which is unbelievably high. So if you want a copy, I've just put.
Oh, we just lost your sound, Judy.
Yeah, so just email me if you want a copy of the book, and I'll tell you what the postage is based on where you live in the world.
Judy's book is fantastic. I have it. I love it. So definitely recommend it. All of our websites are on here. Golda just also posted her Demystifying Education as well. I know Judy's is referenced in here too. Check out the podcast. Both Golda and Judy have been interviewed on the podcast. I love these two ladies, and I love chatting with them, and I always learn. The chores discussion. Okay, that will be a good one for sure. Okay, we can do that one. And yeah, we still support the community. I do a Patreon Q&A live at the end of every month. And we have our Clubhouse community where we host discussions a couple times a week as well. And so that is accessible for everyone. If you're on Clubhouse, if you have just a phone, you can get on Clubhouse. And yeah, there's some great episodes coming out this week too. I have my masterclass as well that starts October 2nd. So I do that every year, small group intimate masterclass, where it's kind of like this. We do have specific themes for each week. It's over 4 weeks where we really get to deep dive over 2 hours. And then we have conversations throughout the week and other support that I provide to on natural learning journey, deschooling, and really building that and getting some support and feedback and encouragement and building community. So yeah, we have lots of Golda as well. Golda has a ton of resources on her website too. She's our facilitator, our family facilitator. So she's a person I also go to for support and questions. So thank you everybody for coming today. If I missed anything, let me know, ladies. No? Okay. All right, everyone. Have a great day. We will just check our social media and email newsletters for when we are going to do this next. Judy will be traveling, so I think it'll be after probably when she returns home, possibly. We'll talk about it and we'll let everybody know.
I kind of want to see Germany or Spain in the background, actually. So I'm just
Okay, we're off world schooling.
That's right. That's right. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I'll share this recording in my Patreon community, is where it'll be shared right now. And I'll send the recordings to Judy and Golda as well. So, okay. Take care.